So what I would like to do briefly is we're dealing primarily today with chapter 27, and that is the conundrum between about the birthright regarding Yaakov and Esav and all of the trouble that arose from that. Now, I'm going to back up just briefly to the end of chapter 25 to just talk really briefly about when we are first introduced to Jacob and Esau when they're born. So, what I want to do, I'm just going to remind you that Passover's coming up on the 30th, Yom HaPekarim, Sunday, Passover HaShabbat on the 6th. Sign-up sheet is ready to go. We've got most of you all signed up, like I mentioned previously. So there you have that. And then before I read this section of chapter 25, I'm starting in chapter 25, verse 19, and just to the end of that section, as the children are born, to just cover a couple of things. But I wanted to briefly have a discussion with you regarding the purely physical reading of the text versus what might be considered a more spiritualized, some might say fanciful, reading of the text. So, we know and have heard before regarding, people reading the text of the Torah in a fleshly way, for example. What does that mean to you? I don't mean that in a negative way, just like Angela has pointed out before about the flesh versus the spirit, the right versus the left, in regards to Jacob and Esau, that this is not necessarily, you don't want to just automatically attribute flesh equals evil and spirit equals good, but just the dichotomy of spirit versus flesh. Don't attach the word evil anywhere.
I think they also call it like exoteric.
Exegetic?
Like exoteric Christianity.
Oh, okay.
Or exoteric in general, you take everything literal, and
okay.
This word means this, and you always bring it down indeed to the material
Right.
realm.
Right. And I think and again, I want to point out, there's nothing wrong with reading the text of the Torah or the prophets or any of the scriptures with just reading it on a very surface level just to get the story. What is it saying? What does the text basically tell you to your brain as though it were just a story? And that, I think, would be a more material, fleshly reading of the text. But what would be, as opposed to that, what would be a more spiritual reading of the text? How would you get to the spiritual side of it?
Looking at what it's a picture of, how does it affect you inside?
Yes.
Is there any changes in your life because of this text?
Yes.
If the Torah is supposed to be written on our hearts, what does that mean? How
right.
Does that change you?
I think that's an excellent insight, and I think both are valid. Okay, I just want to remind you both are valid. James.
Well, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here. I don't think you can have one without the other.
Very good, very good.
I think we are carnal creatures.
Yep.
And we are meant to experience things.
Yep.
And that we can theoretically understand a spiritual meaning, but until you observe Passover, I don't care how many times you read the account of it, you don't understand Passover.
Good.
And then every time you observe Passover, or anything else for that matter, every time you observe it, there's another layer of physical understanding, but of spiritual understanding as well.
That's a great insight.
So I don't think we can separate those two.
Good.
We have to practically apply something to truly understand, to really understand it.
Yes, and I think that doesn't contradict me at all. I totally am on board with that, and it goes both ways. And I have probably mentioned to you a couple of times, if you'll remember, that the rabbis have for a long time said that one who does not enact a commandment in his or her life doesn't really understand it. So, like James said, if you can read about the Passover account all you want, but once you actually celebrate a Passover, it really starts to take on some meaning. Once you read in your Bible, you shall observe the Shabbat. Well, once you observe a Shabbat, it becomes infused with much more meaning. And you have to start on a surface level with the text. You can't start anywhere else. I mean, you're not going to hold the Bible to your head and hope that the Holy Spirit works through osmosis. So, but I think Mike makes a good point that once you have begun to interact with the text on a base level, you need to begin to ask questions and begin to interact with the text, like saying, what does it mean to me?
I think that another way to look at it for me is the first thing that comes to my mind is in the New Testament. I can't remember which, it's James or whoever, talking about the sincere milk of the word, and to be desiring of that.
Mm-hmm.
But then it also, even right then or right near there, talks about needing to grow up and get past that,
Right.
and get into the real meat of the word.
Sure.
But for me, I grew up on mostly the milk of the word and started sometimes seeing the meat, and I believe the Lord was growing me up in himself over those years. But at the same time, not really getting into it, what really opened my eyes and really got me going so that I could even chat with my husband without getting angry is, well, I was in the Word my whole life, and who's this newcomer coming to me like this? When I
Johnny
see
come
all
lately?
his faults anyway, you know? And it was really horrible. I was awful. The Lord just had to really deal with me on it. But it helped me a whole lot when we started. Well, the Lord had us look at Rico Cortez and learning about the ancient Near East and how God built all of this in the Old Testament on things that the people back then understood.
Yeah.
And it never had occurred to me, and it started just making it even more alive.
Sure.
And so I think that it's a progression. I don't think very many people start with more than just the milk of the word.
Absolutely. And that's a great insight. And what I would say is that I think that some people have a misconception about what the milk versus the meat of the word is. And I don't know whether I agree with you or not. I wasn't sure exactly what you were suggesting was the meat or the milk. But what is your common perception amongst you guys regarding what is the milk and what is the meat? What is the milk of the word? If we're saying, and I think you're right, Gracie, to say that there are, levels, or I don't know if is it levels or is it sections? What is it? What is the milk?
It's the beginning as the babe in Christ and growing into a mature Christian.
Okay, so for
We never
example,
will be totally mature until we're in his presence.
right, but what are you starting with? What is the milk, Jerry?
I think if you go to Acts 15, it talks about those four commandments that a new Christian
Sure.
would obey if they wanted to go to the temple.
Sure.
I mean, not
The synagogue, right.
That might be the milk, and then as time goes on and they go to the synagogue every Saturday and they hear God's word read from Moses' seat, then they're learning the meat of the word. They're learning the Torah. The Torah is the meat.
Okay. James?
If we think about the carnal element of it, the flesh element of what milk is versus meat, milk is more easily digestible. The nutrients are easier to access. Your body doesn't have to work as hard.
Yeah.
Your digestive system doesn't have to be as developed to acquire it, but it's not as substantial for long-term growth
Sure.
as the meat is. So
Right.
when we think of the milk of the word, I think it could be either physical or spiritual application, but it's the easier elements. It's the things.
Sure.
And I think that may be different for different people. I am an engineer. My background's engineering. So certain things, something that's mathematical or engineering concept, I might get faster than somebody else.
Right.
But somebody else who has a different kind of background might get something that's way too far away for me to get.
Sure.
They see it easier. So
Yeah.
I think it's different per person. I think it's physical and spiritual.
Right.
But it's the things that are easier to take and digest and assimilate.
Okay.
And then the others are, as you further apply it,
Right.
that you start to grab those deeper things.
Okay. Angela?
I always thought it was kind of I don't know who said it, but I thought it was kind of opposite, that the Torah was the milk, and that Paul comes along and Yeshua comes along and starts talking about that was meat, in terms of being hard to digest and very...
Well, I think that Jerry had a good insight here when he started talking about Acts chapter 15. Because what do we have? We have basic principles from the Torah that would allow Gentiles to be considered at least partially clean so that they could come into an assembly of believers in the meeting place and learn what? Moses. So what is the milk? Moses is the milk. And how do you think that we all got wrapped around the axle and had no idea what we were talking about for 40, 50 years? Because we were choking on the milk. We were choking on the milk, excuse me. The milk is the Torah. I think, where do you start reading any book? At the beginning. Okay, so if you jump in midstream and you come to the book of Acts or the Gospel of John, God forbid, you're going to choke on that.
John is probably tell you a story.
I know it is, but that's one of the hardest books in the Bible. And that is serious spiritual meat. That is some meaty stuff. And if you don't have some kind of a background in figuring out what is the context of this, I think there's a case to be made, and I would make the case, this is my opinion, mind you, there's nothing in the scripture that tells you what is the milk and what is the meat, but I think that just the argument from rationalism says the milk is the Torah, and the meat is what you graduate to learn the Messiah, and what are the implications of the Messiah. That's really powerful stuff, very deep. Tracy, I apologize, and then Keith.
So Peter talks about we should desire the word as newborn babes, and he compares it to milk, the milk of the word. And like you said, that's where we should start, is by coming to this word and learning how to be diligent to study, and then you'll start to grow in the word, so you can grow thereby. And then in Hebrews, I think this is a good description, is he's talking to people who think themselves to be teachers and saying, you have come to need milk and not solid food. You need to be taught again. You need to go back.
Which is where we all are, by the way.
And for everyone who partakes only of milk is unskilled in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. But solid food belongs to those who are full of age, that is, those who by reason of use have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. So
good insight.
This knowledge that comes as you grow, just like when you receive the Torah, you don't just know how to do it all.
Yeah.
You have to learn.
Right.
And this is just like a baby taking in food and graduating to.
Yep. I feel like I'm still sucking on the bottle, and that my mama chops me up some pieces of steak once in a while, maybe ground beef.
Well, yeah, if you look at the Brit Hadashah, everything's referring back to the Torah, and it's assumed that maybe you had exposure to that.
Some type of.
They allude to a lot of things that'll go right over your head when they're mentioning stuff out of the scripture from the Torah.
Yeah. Or you'll interpret it from your own cultural context and totally screw it up.
Right, yeah, if you don't have it in the right context.
Right.
So, yeah, that makes sense that you're saying go back there to get the milk, and once you have that understanding.
I think you got to have a foundation. You got to have a good foundation. So that's why we spend a lot of time, studying the Torah and finding out what is the basis of this stuff.
Well,
so we're working.
How many times we make the comparison with Paul and everybody says, look, this is a parallel from back here.
Right.
But you wouldn't catch it.
Yeah, you wouldn't know that if you hadn't started with milk. Gracie, apologize.
But until you are being exposed to people who believe like this, which is in my circles very new,
Sure.
based on what I was taught from the time I was 3 years old and taken to church, was about the Lord Jesus, about his virgin birth, his death, his resurrection, my need for salvation.
Sure.
And I believe God honors that until he exposes you to more, and then you best be learning.
That's a fair characterization. I totally agree. And it's only by his grace that your eyes were opened. I fully am on board with that.
My brothers and my sisters in Indiana and in Maine. And
it's got to start with you. It's got to start somewhere.
They're not wanting to hear, so it makes me wonder, maybe I shouldn't say anything because then they're responsible. But that's not right either.
Good point.
That's right.
They want to see you live it first.
But
Then they'll
want to
listen.
they want me to explain to them.
No, that's a
So
good.
they can
That's a
tell me
good
what's
step.
wrong, which I can live with that.
That's fine. Yeah.
We still love each other.
I feel you. Tracy.
The relation to milk and meat too, with literal and spiritual, I think there's two things that I want to say about that. So 1 Corinthians 3 is when Paul is saying, I could not speak to you as spiritual people, but as to carnal, as to babes in Messiah. So literal, you must do this first in order to receive the meat later, which is the spiritual. I fed you with milk and not with solid food, for until now you were not able to receive it, and even now you are not able because you're still carnal. So this is where you are with the milk. It's this, okay, I don't know anything yet, I've got to start somewhere.
Right.
And I think what Messiah says ties it up perfectly when he says, I speak to you of earthly things you do not understand. How will you understand if I speak to you of spiritual things?
Yeah.
You can't have the meat yet.
That's right. Good point. So why do I bring this up? Well, because if you're reading this, It seems like a very simple story, but you know that it's not, because we've been studying this book for almost a year, and we're only in chapter 26, 27. And there's a lot of stuff here, but some of it can seem rather fanciful. I know this. I'm not ignorant of this fact. And this reminds me of when I was in college and my professors were teaching me how to interpret literature from around the world, and I was like, well, I've read the story. I got this, what was going on. It was a cool story. I enjoyed it. But did you notice this that was down below the surface, this undercurrent, this theme, this recurring theme that kept popping up? I was like, why would I notice that? I'm just enjoying the story. I don't know what you're talking about, hidden details under there. I rebelled against that idea. I thought, well, that's just stupid, that this animal represents something else. And I'm like, no, who would pick up on that? It's like, well, you're not reading the text very carefully, because the author certainly is making allegories and allusions to different things, and there's metaphors all over this thing. You're just skimming right over the top of it. And I thought, I guess I have been doing that. I've been enjoying the heck out of these stories, but I'm missing all this deep stuff that the author intended me to get. But that's in relation to this. This happens with us all the time. And I want to remind you of this one thing. The rabbinic commentators are full of this stuff that's just got all these fanciful little ideas that you don't know, how is that even supported? I would say to you that there is spiritual nuggets here. There are spiritual nuggets here. And that we need to maybe hold on to them tenuously, as Jacob did, for example, when Joseph related his dream to him. He said, this is ridiculous. What are you talking about? But he treasured that knowledge in his heart. Maybe we address it like that. I just didn't want people to kind of get tripped up over some of the fanciful stuff that we do with this text. But if you get nuggets of truth out of it, spiritual gems, as we're figuring out where is the Messiah in this text, or how does this have to do anything with me, or is this prophetic? And when we're reading it above the level of just the base, here's what's happening in the story, just to kind of hold on to those little nuggets, and they may be of use to you at some point spiritually.
You make a good point, because I remember being in grade school and the same thing, but they were reading Charlotte's Web. And the teacher's trying to explain to me how it's about communism. And I'm a kid. I'm like, they were trying to show all that, because that's, and I'm like,
yeah.
I
mean, you might read Animal Farm or Fahrenheit 451 or something and go, this is a very interesting sci-fi story, but you may totally just go right over your head.
There's some deeper meaning, but if you're not ready to hear it or even understand it, then, same thing here. Someone can point out some neat things, but if you're not ready to accept them.
Yeah. And I do definitely believe that there are all kinds of neat spiritual nuggets of truth that are buried in this text. Some of them are fanciful, and I don't know what they mean exactly. Are they valuable? They certainly could be, and that's why I'm saying hold on to them tenuously. Keep them in your little store box and say, what is this? I don't know, but it may be of use someday. Hold on to it tenuously. That's all I would say. So with that preamble, let us begin in Genesis chapter 25, verse 19. So here is the history of Yitzhak, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Yitzhak, and Yitzhak was 40 years old when he took Rivkah, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean, from Paddan Aram and sister of Lavan, the Aramean, to be his wife. Yitzhak prayed to Adonai on behalf of his wife because she was childless. Adonai heeded his prayer, and Rivkah became pregnant. The children fought with each other inside of her so much that she said, if it's going to be like this, why am I alive? So she went to inquire of Adonai, who answered her, there are two nations in your womb. From birth they will be two rival peoples. One of these peoples will be stronger than the other, and the older will serve the younger. When the time came for her delivery, there were twins in her womb. The first to come out was reddish and covered all over with hair like a coat, so they named him Esav, or hairy. Then his brother emerged with his hand holding Esav's heel, so he was called Yaakov, which is the root is ekev, which means grabbing or usurping or pulling a wrestling move or something. So Yitzhak was 60 years old when she bore them. The boys grew, and Esav became a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Yaakov was a quiet man who stayed in the tents. Yitzhak favored Esav because he had a taste for game. Rivkah favored Yaakov. One day, when Yaakov had cooked some stew, Esav came in from the open country, exhausted, and said to Yaakov, please let me gulp down some of that red stuff. That red stuff. I'm exhausted. This is why he was called Edom, which means red. Yaakov answered, first sell me your rights as the firstborn. Look, I'm about to die, said Esav. What use to me are my rights as the firstborn? Yaakov said, first swear to me. So he swore to him, thus selling his birthright to Yaakov. Then Yaakov gave him bread and lentil stew. He ate and drank, got up, and went on his way. Thus Esav showed how little he valued his birthright. So we had talked about this briefly, and I think actually it might have been Angela who dealt with this primarily just high-level stuff last week. And I wanted to just bring out a couple of things that caught my attention in reviewing Angela's notes for this. Now, number one, I think that it might be worth making a comparison between Rivka and her mother-in-law, Sarah. For example, what similarities or differences do you see in regards to these two women and the children, the issue of children? What's that? Barren. They were both barren. Now, how did Sarah and Abraham deal with the issue of Sarah's barrenness?
Surrogate.
They came up with a surrogate plan with Hagar. How did these guys deal with it? He prayed for his wife. What does that signify to you? The natural knee-jerk reaction is to say, well, it must be that Isaac is more spiritual than Abraham. Do you think that's true?
Or you learned a lesson.
Or he learned a lesson, perhaps. Well, you know how you have that certain member of your family that you just hope doesn't show up to, Christmas back in the day. That might have been Uncle, Ishmael. So this family told stories about Uncle Ishmael. It's like, well, hopefully he'll stay over there. He won't come to visit this holiday season. I don't know. It occurred to me that there was a bit of an interesting conundrum there regarding how Sarah and Abraham kind of took an alternate route, and Yitzhak went right to God and prayed, and God answered his prayer, and she became pregnant. She did have to wait a little while, but it happened, which I thought was a curious thing. For another example, Rivka was barren for approximately 20 years. Sarah was barren for how long? Like 80? I mean, she only was childbearing age at 14, 15 or something like that, but much longer, seemingly. She gave birth with 89 or 90? So she waited longer. Keith?
I mean, since I've been seeing a lot of this and how long it takes for events to happen, and here, you may be praying for something or some knowledge. You're trying to. I'm not saying. We always want immediate results, but at the same time, no matter what, if you want something to be revealed or you're trying to, build your faith, and here you're seeing 20 years behind something as simple as, I shouldn't say simple, but getting fertility, right? Making the wait of 20 years, and then I don't know. It's very interesting how long and how patient.
Yeah.
The patriarchs were.
Yeah. They were definitely. They had to be. Some of them less so than others, but patience was definitely required.
I don't think we're that patient.
No, gosh, are you kidding? Not even close. I don't think. Rivka became pregnant with twins, and of course Sarah only one child. Note that there were definitely in both instances children of the flesh and children of the spirit. One was like a chosen seed, and the other one was rejected, seemingly. But what's interesting in this case is that we have the flesh and the spirit sample of these children inside of her at the same time. Do you think there's any significance to that idea? That both seeds were in her at the same time and were battling each other in her womb? Tracy?
I don't know how spiritual side I'm getting at it, but for me, the surface reason would be the battle that I have in the flesh and the spirit. So the more I try to walk with the Lord.
Yeah. That is an entirely valid takeaway, and I think you couldn't do better than that. If that's all you got, you're doing great, frankly.
I think Andrew kind of talked about that a little bit
Yeah, I think she
Last
covered
week,
that, right.
Just the battle that we had, like she said, between the spirit to
Yep.
rule
Yep.
over the flesh.
Yep.
And which one are you allowing to rule?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the key takeaway, and I just wanted to highlight that for you again, to consider that again, that we have both of these things inside of us.
And something she said too that I thought was really important, and I even took away and shared with my daughter, is that when we get in these funks where we beat ourselves up and we tell ourselves how bad we are, but when you look at a comparison to Jacob and Esau, is that that's the flesh. Esau wants to kill the spirit in you. So Jacob never wanted to kill the flesh. He never wanted to kill his brother.
Right.
But wanted to live peaceably. So I think when the spirit is ruling, you can kind of, and when it's not, you can kind of, if you have that understanding, you can go, wait a minute, who's in charge here?
Yeah.
You know, who's ruling in this moment?
Yeah, absolutely. And you should, review Romans chapters 7 and 8, which deal with this a lot. And if you can go back to our discussion we had a couple of years ago regarding the book of Romans. One other thing that was kind of interesting to me was that Rivka went and inquired of the Lord. Do you have any idea or conception in your mind of how that happened? What, did she just go pray? What's interesting is when you see that phrase in the Torah, inquired of the Lord, that usually has to do with the person going to see a prophet, or a seer, as they were called in those times. Just out of curiosity, how might that have looked back in her day? Who was she going to talk to, for example?
It might have been Job.
Could be. That's a key insight.
He lived in that time frame.
That is reported. That is true. And I think that there are a couple of rabbinic commentaries who suggest that person might have been one of the people that she went to talk to. Anybody else come to mind? There's some speculation that Abraham might have been one, Melchizedek, Shem. Some speculation that Shem might have still been alive. Yeah, well, there's also speculation that Shem was Melchizedek. Yeah, that's an interesting insight as well. But I would say, she went to inquire somehow, some way, and she got the answer. Now, dealing with that answer, that's a whole different issue that we're going to address here in just a sec. We talked briefly about the two natures of these children representing our nature, the physical and the spiritual combined, and needing to get along together, hopefully with the spiritual ruling over the physical and not the other way around. Then you can see much different sections of the text that Angela, I think, pointed out pretty well last time regarding, being in the field versus in the tents and such like that. One thing that came out for me as I was reading that section this week was, finding contentment in relationships and in stillness and in quiet and in solitude. That's a challenging thing for some people. And I'm not necessarily willing even to say that that's what you should do. But I have known people in my life who simply can't sit still, that they travel like every weekend. As soon as the weekend comes, they're traveling. They're gone somewhere. They just can't sit still. And I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't go and have fun or something, but it makes you wonder sometimes, do we need these things out there to give us our lives some adventure or something? And it just reminded me of Jacob. It says that he dwelt in tents. He seemed to find his contentment in the tent. Now, is he a homebody? What do you think that means? I mean, Esau is very much out in the field. He's out in the world enjoying himself and hunting and being an outdoorsy type fella, which is great. Jacob seems to have stayed inside. What does that mean to you? Is he a homebody? Is he staying home all the time? Is he hanging out with the women? What is going on with this idea? Do you have any ideas about that?
He's under his tallit studying the word.
That is the speculation from a lot of commentators, is that he studied. I don't know what he'd be studying exactly. I mean, he'd have to be listening to people talk, because we don't have written scriptures at this time, as far as I know. Jerry?
He may have been learning from his father how to run the show.
Sure.
After Daddy dies.
Sure. Tracy?
What he just, what Jerry just said, did cue something, because in the Torah, in our written word, it does say, and you shall teach these things to your children. And that's really how we're supposed to be spreading the gospel.
Right.
Initially, is by giving it to our children, and they should just know it. That's just how it should be.
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably one of the main ways that these people are receiving God's word.
Yeah, absolutely. Why do you think that Moses told us this section about the stew? Is that just to demonstrate the character of Esau? And what do you think it means when they nicknamed him Red? What are they talking about? They're talking about the red stuff he ate? I mean, some people have said, well, he had red hair. Well, that could be, although it doesn't say so. It said he was hairy. But it does, there are other people in the text of the Tanakh who are ruddy. I'm thinking of David, for example.
It said he was red. He came out red, like a hairy robe.
Does it say red? Is Edom in there?
Yeah, it's a variation.
Okay.
It's Strong's 132.
Well, the interesting thing is that and I thought that too, that this was because he was a ruddy complected person with maybe red hair or something. That is not the common interpretation of this, though. And it's also not because of the red stuff that he said, pour it down my gullet, I'm going to die. It's because of his appetite. His appetite was why he was nicknamed Red. I don't know exactly how that works, but I guess I get a sense maybe of red being related to appetite, maybe eating, blood, killing, hunting, because of his, I think his appetite was what is being characterized here as red, and not necessarily what he ate or the color of his skin or his hair or something like that. I think it's a spiritual metaphor about that.
It just be red as an analogy to fire, and that he was pretty fiery, and
Yeah.
if he's sitting having this dialogue and he eats, he gets up and leaves, he wasn't about to die.
Yeah, clearly.
He's being a little dramatic and a little fiery.
Yeah.
And that kind of stuff. So
Yeah.
maybe it's that he was just sort of that, a little hot tempered.
Yeah, I think when you see him in all of these sections, and also in chapter 27, he does seem to be a very emotional type person. I mean, he's definitely dramatic. He's like, hey, throw that stuff down my pie hole because I'm going to die. I mean, literally, when you read that in the Hebrew, that's what it says. It's like, that's why this translation says gulp down, red stuff. It's the text in the Hebrew is very emphatic. It's like, pour it down me quickly, all of it. It's really weird. And then, of course, when he loses out on his blessing, he's like weeping and wailing really loudly, and he's a very vociferous fella. Red, as far as hot, it's a good idea to me. I'm on board with that. Yes.
A question, unless you're going to ask.
No, go ahead.
I missed, of course, last week with Jacob. He is, of course, saying from, hey, just selling your birthright.
Mm-hmm.
But in this story, to me, it almost sounds like Jacob, he's a little sneaky.
It does seem that way.
That's a mean, purposefully mean thing to do.
Right. And we see Jacob being terribly sneaky later in chapter 27. But, there's...
one of the patriarchs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what's interesting? You see that Yaakov is the root of Echev, which is heel grabber, or maybe some type of wrestling move, or usurper, or something like that. Do you know what Rivka means? His mother's name? Ensnarer. Something a little weird about this.
So, can you tell me, Yaakov, because I've heard, and it says, heel rat catcher or whatever, but I've also heard that when you look at that word, and I'm asking because I don't know, that there is a different meaning, and the heel catcher has been assigned that because of what Esau declared of him, not the truth of his name.
Okay,
I'm just curious.
If you look at the Hebrew word, you see heel,
Yeah,
and then there's a yod, so it's literally hand.
the hand that's grabbing the heel, right. And I think that's just you might spiritualize that, and that's totally cool, but I think it's clearly when he comes out of the womb, he's holding on to his brother's heel. So you got the yod and the echev, which is the heel. So,
And I think we talked about the prophecy a little bit too before
from the Genesis 3, yeah.
Yeah, the flesh seed wants to
Right.
crush the head of the spiritual seed because the prophecy is that
Right.
Messiah, that the
Yeah.
spiritual seed will crush the head of the
Now, did you see anything in your, for example, in your Strong's Concordance or something, which gives other possible root definitions of the word Yaakov?
I have heard them, but as I'm here right now, I don't recall.
No, that's okay. Tracy, do you see?
Catcher, heel holder. That's just what the strong.
It wasn't even related
BB
to
saying.
heal. It was something else that I had heard.
Well, we know he's going to have his name changed soon enough. So we'll see. But I think there's something else. You mentioned briefly, John, that you thought, this seems rather clever. My brother comes in and he's really hungry, and I'm going to take this opportunity to pull a fast one and say, hey, sell me your birthright. That's a little weird. I mean, it seems odd. Yeah, no, the guy was probably hungry. Has anybody heard anything curious about what might be represented by what's happening here with the red lentil stew and all that stuff? Have you heard some of the rabbinic commentary about what potentially was happening with this scenario? Anybody remember that?
I think we talked about this, but I heard that Abraham had passed away, and so it was Esau as the firstborn, his duty to make the mourner's meal.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't do it, so Yaakov did.
Right. That is the rabbinic commentary. And why is that the rabbinic commentary? What are they basing that on? Well, primarily the idea about the lentil stew, because it is apparently common knowledge amongst Middle Eastern scholars that lentil stew and bread is a mourner's meal. And they're kind of speculating, well, who might have died? Well, the member of the family that's the oldest is the patriarch Abraham. So they have speculated that this is actually a mourner's meal that has been prepared for the death of their grandfather Abraham. Now, how does that instill perhaps more meaning to this whole problem of the firstborn and such? Well, because it would have been Esau's responsibility as the firstborn to basically organize all of this stuff with the funeral and preparing the mourner's meal. But where's he at when all this stuff is going down? He's out in the field. He's not paying attention. He's not really interested. And so when he shows up, it's like he's already dead. They're having this funeral service, and he shows up in his ragged clothes out from hunting in the field like he didn't even know what was going down. And he's like, I'm starving, give me some food. And he's like, this is compose yourself. We're having a funeral here. And so it makes it seem a little bit, it informs the text a little bit for me. I'm not saying that I buy it completely, but I see the possibility here that could be what's happening. And that in a couple of ways, Esav is showing how much he scorns the birthright. And you can see what Paul says, or supposedly Paul, who wrote Hebrews, in Hebrews 12, or 16? Sorry. Hebrews 12, 16, I think, where he says, Esav was a godless usurper. So we don't necessarily see that in the text, but Paul seems to have. Keith?
So you're making the assumption that because it would have been Esau's responsibility to make this meal, so then he stepped up and made it. So what's on his mind is, hey, since you don't even show up, I made the meal. Why don't you give me the birthright?
Right.
Then?
You
Since
clearly don't
job.
care about the
Right.
birthright, and I have already begun to step up and take your place. Why don't you just go ahead and finalize it?
Yeah.
Gracie, sorry.
But did this switching around and selling the birthright when Isaac came in hungry, and Esau came in hungry, and he said, yes, take the birthright, and then just feed me.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't at the same time frame as the actual thing that Rebecca did to help Jacob.
No, that would have been a little later on.
So that would have been later on.
Right.
After when Abraham actually died.
Right.
It would have
Which
been right
I
at the
think,
same time.
yeah, it wouldn't be at the same time. It would probably been a bit later. It's seemingly quite a bit later. We're not sure how old the children are at this point. It says that he was 60 years old when the mother gave birth to them, but then this happened. They grew up and everything. There is some speculation that when this was all happening, I have always assumed that this was like these guys are in their 20s or something maybe. There's fairly decent speculation that the boys are almost 70 years old when this happens. Hold on, Jerry, I got to hit my wife. Sorry, what do you want to say?
You said it. You already said it.
Oh, I did. Okay, sorry. Carla. Was it Jerry? Who's raising their hand?
Just doing a timeline, it would seem like Abraham lived to be 175, if these boys were 75, 80 years old. That would have been just about the time he died, like you were saying.
Yes, that's some of the speculation that gone into this is calculating people's ages. That, yeah, these guys were fairly young, or fairly old, excuse me. And, that has some very interesting implications, like when Jacob leaves to go to Uncle Laban's house and finds that young lady, was a 70-year-old guy marrying a 15 or 16-year-old girl. It's not uncommon. Not uncommon at all. I know that's very weird to our Western contemporary ears, but not unusual at all. Someone else? Yes.
Just an idea, because we don't know. I mean, Yaakov is putting it out there, first sell me your birthright. And we don't know what he would have done had Esau said, no, I'm not going to. Okay, well, here, have some anyway. Who
Sure.
knows?
Yeah.
We don't know that.
The important part is that Esau was like, sure, no problem, give it to me. What use is the birthright to me? I'm about to die. It's James mentioned before. Clearly, he's not going to die. I mean, if you got enough energy to get out of the field and into the house again, you're not going to die imminently, James.
So, my mind's sort of tooling through some of this stuff and weaving some of it together. So, there's this, the Almighty said to Rivka, 2 nations are in your womb, and 2 peoples from within you shall be divided, and one shall be stronger than the other shall serve the younger. She knew this. You have Yaakov, who's spent a lot of time around this house. If he was a modern day kid, he probably had a pocket protector.
He's a mama's boy.
Well, he may not have been totally a mama's boy, but what I think of is he was a nerd.
Fair
Whether
enough.
he was sitting and studying Torah, or he was sitting under his father, learning how to run the organization, or all of the above, he was a nerd and a bit of a mastermind type person.
Sure.
Esau was more of a go out, do, get her done type guy. It's very probable he has heard mom and dad talk about this prophecy.
I've often wondered about that.
And if he spent a lot of time at home, this could have been evil intent, it could have been a good intent. He could see, looking and going, wait, the firstborn, the birthright, not only mean he gets it, but he has to run it. And there's a legacy here to carry on. And Esau taking this legacy, that's going to be a disaster for my parents' legacy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so there could have been a sense here from him of saying, how do I coordinate this?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then maybe he'd been waiting for the right time showed up, and he did it. So it wasn't necessarily an evil event. If he's the guy sitting back studying and learning to mastermind things, and that's more his attitude, his way of doing things.
I think that's a decent way to look at it.
That this could have been saying, okay, I'm going to be have a hand in fulfilling the prophecy of God and protecting my father's household. And we have no clue what those conversations look like with his dad at home.
Yeah.
Whether his dad lamented and said, Esau's got to have this. I wish there was a way I could take it away. Whatever. We have no clue what was there.
Yeah.
But we know that had to exist for 70 years or so. Those conversations were there. He was at home. He was learning this, that kind of stuff.
I like your idea about Jacob really seeing how Esau's shirking of his responsibilities, as it were, or just behaving like he's not interested in taking on the family business, or continuing with the family legacy, or taking on some of those more spiritual aspects of the family that Jacob might have felt inclined to protect the family organization from his wayward brother. That's certainly possible. I kind of like that idea. As to whether the whole family was aware of the prophecy that Rivka got, I don't know. That would be such a ruinous piece of information that I imagine to myself that that's just something that maybe she didn't even tell her husband. But it makes you wonder, because when chapter 7:27 rolls around and he's like, I'm going to give the blessing to the firstborn son, Esav, is he just flat out saying, I don't want God's will, I got my own way of doing this, and I'm going to give the blessing to Esav? I don't know. It's totally open for speculation, but it makes me wonder if Rivka ever told anyone. I know if she did tell her husband, gosh, keep it away from the children. That would be a devastating piece of information.
But I think we talked last week, the blessing and the birthright are two different things.
But they are linked. They are very much linked. Okay, I want to bring your attention to this just for a second, okay? You remember that the firstborn is called the Bekor. That's the Hebrew word for firstborn, is Bekor. Bekorah is the right of the firstborn. The Barakah is blessing. And the Bikurim is the first fruits. These words are all linked together. And so you can't have the birthright go to one son and the blessing go to another. Those two things cannot be separated.
Esau apparently thought they could.
He seemed to think they could, yeah. And I think that the blessing that came down was, remember, and we'll get to this in just a moment, but you look at the blessings that come from Jacob, or from Isaac to the son, they're mostly physical in nature. The blessings of the abundance of the earth and the dew of heaven, and this is material blessings, a lot of them. And I think that's what Esau wanted. The stuff. I want the stuff. Sign me up for the will. As far as being in the will, like being the executor of the will, no, I don't want to be the executor of the will. I just want to have what's in the will. And I think that is a good illustration of the right of the firstborn. The firstborn is the executor of the will. It's his job to make sure that the younger daughters are married off into good families, taking care of burials, being the spiritual priest of the family. The executor of the will. There's a lot of responsibilities that come with that. I don't think that Esau was interested in that at all. I think he just wanted the good stuff.
They're two different things. You get blessed or you have to take on responsibility, and he didn't want the responsibility.
Right. And I think that in that culture it is accepted practice that those things need to be combined into one person. And you see examples in the Tanakh, where the firstborn son is skipped over. And I'm not just talking about Jacob and Esau and Isaac and Ishmael. It happens later on in the Judges and stuff, where it's one of the firstborn son is skipped over and goes to a secondborn or third or even a fourthborn, because the firstborn is just not suited for the task. And we see again, like Angela was speaking of, God separating things that are useful or things that are common, if you want to look at it that way. Things that are useful for his kingdom and his program, and that are going to be priests for his nation, and those who are like, you get the blessings from being a part of the family. And we see that every one of these sons, whatever side they went to, the flesh side or the spirit side, they were tremendously blessed. And I think, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's basically the blessing given to Abraham, right? That's being passed on.
Yeah, right.
So, while there's these physical things, it probably also, looks much bigger to them. It is big, but
yeah.
He uses the same words.
Right.
Bless you.
Right.
Bless them, curse you.
Yep.
Right. This is like this whole section in that blessing is kind of talking about basically establishing a kingdom.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Absolutely. John?
Is it a coincidence or?
Do you think it is?
It almost is. Rat is the same word as Adam.
Which one? Erev? Yes. Adam.
Adam.
Yeah, absolutely. They're both from the red earth, the soil, sure. Absolutely.
But does that mean anything you think, or points to anything? The red stuff and,
Well, I think it does in a sense, because you think of the neshama the spirit coming into Adam's nose, but he was crafted from the red earth. So you have, again, a melding of the spiritual and the physical in him. So I think there's, yeah, absolutely. Tracy?
It's also indicative of blood.
Yeah.
The redness of blood. I
Right.
was sitting here pondering like what Esau's character is, and is he bloodthirsty kind of thing, you know?
Many have thought so, and I don't know that it would be, you
I
know.
wonder how they pronounce it back then. Now we have all the fancy marks underneath that, but this language, the Hebrew, didn't even exist. It was a total different language, the Paleo.
Sure.
So did they in that time say Adam or for red, and people automatically knew what was meant by
Yeah.
that?
Yeah,
I don't
that's
know.
that's
Like
possible.
first or-
Yeah, that's possible. Somebody else? Okay, I thought I saw a hand up. Was it you?
Yeah, but I don't want to be repetitive, but
Hey, repetition is the soul of something.
like thinking of the hunter stuff, to me, took me back to like Nimrod.
A mighty hunter. Sure. Yeah, I think that the reader is probably being led in that direction, if I had to guess, to associate somehow Esau with Nimrod because of the hunting thing. Yeah. I know if it comes to your mind, it probably came to a lot of people's minds, and I think that's not for no reason. That when you see he became a mighty hunter and such, it doesn't say that exactly, but it kind of brings up echoes of Nimrod, and I don't have any problem with that. I mean, think about what happened with Nimrod, that he was the first to establish a great kingdom on the earth, and that he was in charge of this great nation, and he established a mighty empire that was an amalgamation of what appeared to be some kind of socialism or communism or something with a bunch of spiritual aspects. And you know, when Jacob goes off to be with Uncle Laban and he comes back and sees his brother, who is with his brother? 400 horsemen. That's a sizable little force. So in the interim, Esav has put together a mini army. Does it say that he could be bloodthirsty? Potentially. To say that he could be somehow associated with Nimrod trying to build his kingdom? Absolutely it could be. He's going to rule from Mount Seir, and you got all kinds of nasty interaction with him and his relatives in the land of Israel later on. So yeah, I think that there's a natural connection there. I don't have a problem with that at all. Good point.
Doesn't he marry like into Ishmael's family?
Yeah, he marries a couple of Hittite women and one of Ishmael's children. And then also, what's interesting, you look at there's a genealogical record coming up in a little bit about the descendants of Esau. And you know what's curious, and you should check into this, it's very weird. It starts listing all of his descendants all the way down to the grandchildren, and it kind of goes into some depth, which you don't get with a lot of other genealogies in the Bible. But then, not only do you get several generations to the grandchildren, you also get, all of a sudden, it starts talking about the Horites. It's like, why are you giving us the delineation of the Horites and some other people in Esau's generations, his Toldot? It's a very curious thing, and I think you should mark that down and take a look at it. And you know, do you know anything about the Horites? I'm pretty sure, and I could be wrong, but check into this. I think that the Horites were one of the race of giants who were dispossessed from Seir when Esau took over. But it seems to indicate from that genealogical record that Esau and his descendants were intermarrying with the Horites. They're listed in the generations, the Toldot of Esav. Very strange. Very strange indeed.
Is that any relation to the Hittites?
No.
No.
He married a couple of women from the Hittite nation, but that's further north and east. That's in modern-day Turkey. Yeah. I think that the Horites were one of the giants, because when it talks about the people that were dispossessed of their land, I think that there's something about the Horites in there and the Rephaites. You might want to check into that. It's kind of interesting. I don't know. It was puzzling to me. How are we doing on time? I have no idea. 8:35. Well, I'll tell you what. You know what? Let's do this. Let's just go forward a little bit and let's look at Genesis chapter 27, okay? Let's just read it. And we may have enough time to answer maybe a question or two in regards to Genesis chapter 27.
We're just in 25.
we were just in 25, backing up a little bit to get the birth of these children. Now we're going to the next episode. Angela covered pretty sufficiently chapter 26 last week. So yeah, we're jumping forward by one whole chapter. So Genesis 25, verses 1 through 13 on my little page here. In the course of time, after Yitzhak had grown old and his eyes were dim so that he could not see, he called Esav his older son and said to him, "My son?" And he answered, "Hineni, here I am. Look, I'm old now. I don't know when I will die. Therefore, please take your hunting gear, your quiver of arrows and your bow. Go into the country and get me some game. Make it tasty, the way I like it, and bring it to me to eat. Then I will bless you before I die." Rivka was listening when Yitzhak spoke to his son Esav. So when Esav went out to the country to hunt for game and bring it back, she said to her son Yaakov, "Listen, I heard your father telling Esav, your brother, bring me game and make it tasty so I can eat it. Then I will give you my blessing in the presence of Adonai before my death. Now pay attention to me, my son, and do what I tell you. Go to the flock and bring me back 2 choice kids or goats. I will make it tasty for your father the way he likes it, and you will bring it to your father to eat, so that he will give his blessing to you before his death." Yaakov answered Rivka his mother, "Behold, Esav is hairy, but I have smooth skin. Suppose my father touches me. He'll know I'm trying to trick him, and I'll bring a curse on myself, not a blessing." But his mother said, "Let your curse be on me. Just listen to me, and go get me the kids." So he went, got them, and brought them to his mother, and his mother prepared them in the tasty way his father loved. Next, Rivka took Esav, her eldest son's best clothing, which she had with her in the house, and put them on Yaakov, the younger son. And she put the skins of the goats on his hands and on the smooth parts of his neck. So then she gave the tasty food and the bread she had prepared to her son Yaakov. He went to his father and said, "My father." And he said, "Here I am." "Who are you, my son?" And Yaakov said to his father, "I am Esav, your firstborn. I've done what you asked me to do. Get up, sit down, eat the game, and then give me your blessing." Yitzhak said to his son, "How did you find it so quickly, my son?" And he answered, "Adonai, your Elohim, made it happen that way." Now Yitzhak said to Yaakov, "Come here, close to me, so I can touch you, my son, and know whether you are in fact my son, Esav, or not." Yaakov approached Yitzhak his father, who touched him and said, "The voice is Yaakov's voice, but the hands are Esav's hands." However, he didn't detect him, because his hands were hairy like his brother, Esav's hands. So he gave him his blessing. He asked, "Are you really my son, Esav?" And he replied, "I am." And he said, "Bring it here to me, and I will eat my son's game, so that I can give you my blessing." So he brought it up to him, and he ate, and he also brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Yitzhak said to him, "Come close now and kiss me, my son." He approached and kissed him. Yitzhak smelled his clothing and blessed Yaakov with these words, "Behold, my son smells like a field which the Lord has blessed. So may God give you dew from heaven and the richness of the earth, and grain and wine in abundance. May peoples serve you, and nations bow down to you. May you be Lord over your kinsmen. Let your mother's descendants bow down to you. Cursed be everyone who curses you, and blessed be everyone who blesses you." As soon as Yitzhak had finished giving his blessing to Yaakov, when Yaakov had barely left his father's presence, Esav his brother came in from his hunting. He too had prepared a tasty meal and brought it to his father. And now he said to his father, "Let my father get up and eat from his son's game, so that you may give me your blessing." Yitzhak his father said to him, "Who are you?" And he answered, "I am your son, your firstborn, Esav." Yitzhak began trembling uncontrollably and said, "Then who was it that took game and brought it to me? I ate it all just before you came and gave him my blessing. That's the truth, and the blessing must stand." When Esav heard his father's words, he burst into loud, bitter sobbing. "Father, bless me too," he begged. And he replied, "Your brother came deceitfully and took away your blessing." And Esav said, "His name is Yaakov. It really suits him, because he has supplanted me these 2 times. He took away my birthright, and here now he has taken away my blessing." Then he said, haven't you saved or reserved a blessing for me? Yitzhak answered Esav, look, I have made him your lord, and have given him all his kinsmen as servants, and I have given him grain and wine to sustain him. What else is there that I can do for you, my son? Esav said to his father, have you only one blessing, my father? Father, bless me too. Esav wept aloud, and Yitzhak his father answered him, behold, your home will be of the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above. You will live by your sword, and you will serve your brother. But when you break loose, you shall shake his yoke off your neck. Esav hated his brother because of the blessing his father had given him. Esav said to himself, the time for mourning my father will soon come, and then I will kill my brother Yaakov. But the words of Esav, her son, were told to Rivkah, and she sent for Yaakov, her younger son, and said to him, here, behold, your brother Esav is comforting himself over you by planning to kill you. Therefore, my son, listen to me. Get up and escape to Lavan, my brother in Haran. Stay with him a little while until your brother's anger subsides. Your brother's anger will turn away from you, and he will forget what you did to him. Then I'll send and bring you back from there. Why should I lose both of you on the same day? And Rivkah said to Yitzhak, I'm sick to death of these Hittite women. If Yaakov marries one of the Hittite women like those who live here, my life won't be worth living. Fascinating little section, isn't that? I think I'm just going to leave it there. Go ahead.
Just a point of clarification.
Please.
Because I found in my Aleph Tav scripture
Yeah.
the point about the Aleph Tav in front of Yaakov.
Please, yeah.
And it says here that the day Isaac calls to Esau to ask him to hunt some savory meat so that Isaac may bless Esau as the firstborn. Once Jacob deceives Isaac and receives the firstborn blessing in Esau's place, we never see the Aleph Tav symbol in front of Esau's name again in the Torah. It only occurs in front of Jacob's name.
Interesting. Yeah, very interesting. Did you note, I'm sure you probably did you notice in your Bible, I'm guessing it's true, and you'll have to tell me, that he says to him in verse 39 that Yitzhak answered, his father answered him and said, behold, your home will be of the riches of the earth. Does yours say something different?
Fatness.
Does it say away from?
Shall be from the fat.
Shall be from the fat of the earth.
Away from the fatness of the earth shall your dwelling be.
So some of your translations say away from fatness of the earth, and some say of the fatness of the earth. I always found that curious because in the Hebrew text, the word away from is not there. And it sounds to me like when you read it strictly from the Hebrew text, did it sound to you like Esau actually got a blessing? Because in some Bibles it makes it sound like there's no blessing for you. Your inheritance is away from the blessing.
It doesn't say away.
No, it doesn't. That's what I was saying. It does. The word away is not in there, and I'm not sure why so many different translations have the word away in there.
So what does it say then?
It literally says your home will be of the richness of the earth and of the dew of the heaven. But a lot of translations say your home will, your inheritance or whatever will be away from the richness and away from the dew of the earth. Like you're getting nothing. But that's not actually what it says. Keith?
Well, they use the two words that, what is it, mineh, and then the word for fat, the mashma.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that the Strong says that mineh should be like out of the fatness of the earth.
Right. You're going to be blessed out of the fatness of the earth. Right.
You're going to be given. Yeah.
I don't know why away is in there so many times in so many translations.
When you read that this time, it triggered another scripture of what he could be actually saying here. And my God give you the dew of the heavens and the fatness of the earth and much grain and wine. Deuteronomy 32, give ear, O heavens, now speak, and hear, O earth, the words of my mouth, my doctrine shall drop as the rain, my speech shall distill as the dew.
So you're talking about the blessing for Jacob,
Yeah.
not Esau. Okay, yes. Yeah, and that's part of my questions for you is to look at the comparison and the similarities and the contrast between the blessing that is actually given to Esau and the one that is given to Jacob. Because in some scriptures it seems to say that Esau got nothing. He's like, I got nothing for you. Your home is away from all the good stuff. But then in the Hebrew it literally says your home is of the good stuff. But there are some serious key differences here. Keith?
Okay, well now I've got a translation, because I'm looking at a couple here. And this translation reads, his father Isaac answered him, the place where you live will lack the fertile fields of the earth and the dew from the sky above.
Now, where does it get that? I don't know why some translations suggest that.
27:39. It will lack. So
Yeah.
now I'm going to take these things from you. That's not a blessing.
No, it doesn't make any sense. I think that this is a strictly material blessing. Jacob's blessing is got a lot more spiritual components to it. I'll put it that way.
It goes much longer.
Yeah, and I would just suggest that you read it, look at it, compare and contrast those two blessings that are given to the children. Because I think Esau did get a blessing, but not in the sense that he was, maybe in the sense he was hoping for. I'm not sure. James?
So, two things sort of stand out with me on this. The first is, if I have two sons that I want to bless, I may bless the firstborn, or what I perceive as the firstborn, quite a bit.
Maybe a double portion.
Yeah, but I'm still going to bless my secondborn. So something's going on here that, because, and I think contextually where this interpretation issue is coming in is because contextually he said there's nothing for you.
Yeah.
So I think they're inferring some language.
Right.
Because contextually he said there's nothing for you.
Right.
Which
Yeah.
I
understand
questions,
that.
and I don't have answers, but I have questions about
Sure.
about the father side of this. But something in a very practical sense for me, when I've seen this and I've seen a lot of other places where there's blessings, it caused me to really go say, wait, let me look at these blessings.
Mm-hmm.
And the more and more I study blessings, a blessing from a father to his children is a prophetic event.
Absolutely.
It's not, and there can be a physical pass down, but there is a prophetic event.
Yeah.
And for parents, something that this piece right here, of studying this scares me.
Yeah.
Because the words we speak over our children, something about it has this significance that God listens,
Mm-hmm.
and it actually shapes his will.
It's interesting,
in his
isn't it?
direction, and he will conform to this, and that.
I think that's
should be
yeah,
significant.
that's a
That
powerful
should
thing.
sink in for a little while.
The rabbis suggest that when a father is giving the blessing over his sons, that the Spirit of God comes upon him in a powerful way, which I could not gainsay, frankly.
I really appreciated what you said about if you had more than one child, you would consider what you would
Yeah.
pray over them, just like Yaakov did over his 12.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
No, those weren't always awesome blessings, the ones that Jacob gave to his 12. But they were prophetic, absolutely. Well, let's wrap up in fellowship and eat food and whatnot together, and then we'll pick up next time and kind of tear this apart. I apologize for making you linger 2 chapters back from where we were, but good discussion anyway. Let us pray.